Dune Awakening was originally advertised as a massive MMO. We've then been downgraded to 1,000 players, 900, 800. Now we're at a measly 300 max player count that can exist within the deep desert for a single world within Dune Awakening. And this completely changes everything. It's going to mean that being a solo player is going to be much more viable on top of what we covered yesterday. This also changes how the guilds will work, and it has a huge impact and flow-on effect. But why is it only 300 players? And what you need to know about the new understanding we have of how it will work, which was all revealed through a dev Q&A with Shroud, which was excellent. They went into a lot of detail, but it does leave a bit of a sour taste for many of us, as the number has shrunk considerably from what was initially promised or mentioned within marketing. But we'll go through why as we go along. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about this craziness from MMO to 300 people? But regardless, the fact is, this is what we have for Dune Awakening's Deep Desert, player caps, and how it's all going to work. Now, it's important to understand this is just my interpretation. Let me know if I've got anything wrong. I think it's right, but it was a bit hard to sort of gauge from that insight we got. Now, if you haven't watched my video on how the servers work for Haga Basin, which wants to join, check the links in the description or the top right. That will give you a good understanding of the Haga Basin, but we're quickly going to touch on this again. And it's important we go through this quickly just so we can understand how this links in with the deep desert. The servers will work with your world. You'll click on that. It will drop down 20 instances of Haga Basin, which can support up to currently 40 players that we know of, which means within a world, there is 800 players existing within that world at most, all at once if everyone was online. And those 800 players are going to be sharing the deep desert. So how does 800 people now squeeze into the deep desert of 300 players? That is a big question a lot of us are asking. So let's see if we can figure it out, how it's all going to work. The deep desert is the PvP endgame zone. Its server structure is a server mesh hybrid with a 3x3 grid of zones, which equates to what you could say 9 squares. Each of these squares or each of these servers have a player cap of 100 players, and this 100 player cap then gets split into a 50-50 between the two factions, 50 Atreides and 50 Harkonnen. The total deep desert player cap is 300 players, which has the same split between factions, only allowing 150 Atreides and 150 Harkonnen within deep desert at a time. So what does this mean? Let's go through a hypothetical scenario. We have 100 Atreides on this server. It's capped. We have 50 Atreides on this server. Well, we've hit the total cap for this deep desert. What happens for the other 100 players that are all Atreides looking to get into the deep desert? My understanding is, since we've reached this cap, these 100 players are waiting in a queue for one of these guys to leave in order for them to be able to jump into the deep desert. Continuing on from this example, even if there is 50 Harkonnen over in this other server, leaving 100 free slots within the deep desert, Atreides players will still have to wait, as the total 150 Atreides are maxing out the cap. So what happens in this scenario if you're not aligned to other Atreides or Harkonnen? Well, in that case, you're entering the deep desert, not aligned to any faction. You're not counted to the 150 Harkonnen or the 150 Atreides. This means you're not blocked by the faction balance rules, but you still count towards the global 300 player cap. So for example, we have 100 solo players within the deep desert. The server has now reached its limit as it's capped at 300 players. That's just a rough rundown of how it's going to work with the new auto balancing rules or the faction split rules. 150 for each faction. Those not in a faction still count towards the 300 max player cap. Now, the only way to get into deep desert is through the southern gate. Everyone will pretty much be entering through the southern gate. There is some info out there about leaving or arriving via a trade post, but for the most part, everyone is entering and exiting through the southern gate. So understanding that, what they've done is they've limited all of the servers, these 9 servers, to 100 players. So what happens when one of these squares or areas within the deep desert reaches its max population cap? Well, what will happen is, from the game lore perspective, the Emperor is going to throw down a shield surrounding this area, preventing any players from entering. That shield will drop as soon as this square drops to 99. As a player's left into this square, the shield goes away. It's worth noting that the shield that pops up when you're at 100 players within this square will be visible. You'll see a blue penta shield surrounding the area, and you won't be able to access it. You'll be able to crash into the shield, bounce off it. So if you're out in the deep desert and you see that blue penta shield, you know that that area is currently maxed out with 100 players in it. A very obvious indicator to what's happening within that area. Being heavily contested or it's heavily populated with some kind of guild battle going on. Just throwing this in here, it's important to understand that these 100-player servers equate to a massive area, probably almost like one Hager basin each, if not more. The deep desert is freaking massive. So now that we understand how the deep desert is divided from a server perspective, knowing that all these servers are meshed together and you will be traveling between these servers pretty much seamlessly, but they only hold 100 players each. And this is the most critical aspect to understanding the current restrictions with the infrastructure, performance, as this is pretty much the gatekeeper on why Dune Awakening is only going to have 300 player cap in PvP on go live. Now, the devs allude to this being a technical issue with Unreal Engine not being designed for server meshing, and that it has been extremely difficult for them to try implement a more robust player count and cap within the deep desert due to the nature of Unreal Engine. Having more players could possibly lead to lag, desync, server crashes, as the map is freaking huge, which covers dynamic weather, explosions, vehicles, NPCs. It's a lot. But the biggest concern with how player caps are going to work within this game is basically having the ability to lock people out. So since we can only have 100 people per area, this will allow people to always be able to exit the deep desert. So let's run through an example. So ultimately, everyone is entering through the southern gate, which is down here. This is almost like the safe area, the PvE area, or at least a portion of it might be. And it's reported that all the best loot and best resource nodes and everything is at the back here. So ultimately, everyone is trying to travel, at least the bigger guilds or people of some quantifiable number will be trying to get to these areas at the back, which will give them overall an edge due to the resources and what's available, including rare schematics, Landsrad locations, and a lot is going to be happening around this area. So an easy way to understand why the 100 player cap exists is, let's say we have one highly sophisticated and organized group that actually takes up the whole deep desert, and they are occupying the entry. So currently no players can go in and none of these players are leaving. So if they increased this cap to say 301, this poor solo player, this solo player now can't actually escape the deep desert, as now there is a pentashield across this whole area, completely blocking and restricting this guy from getting out. Gotta love my arrows, whatever the hell that is. So that's a very simple breakdown of why it is restricted to 100 players, coupled with the performance impacts, Unreal Engine restrictions. But the devs do illuminate that this may change in the future as they figure out and implement a more robust system, code, servers to hopefully increase these numbers. But at the moment, this is what we've got. So now that we understand that the deep desert has way less people that are going to be able to occupy, how the hell is 800 players going to squeeze into the deep desert? Well, like any online game that's similar, you're going to have the peaks and troughs. I imagine initially this is going to be kind of annoying. I expect there's going to be potentially some long freaking wait times to get into the deep desert. But mind you, it's reported that there's hundreds of hours of PvE available. Everyone's going to be on different availabilities. Weekends obviously going to be crazy busy. So those times, and particularly at launch, are going to be something of a concern, at least how I imagine it. But in saying that, it's going to take some time to get the deep desert unless you're a veteran from the beta and well-organized guild. So maybe this won't be such an issue initially, but let me know what you think. How are we going to squeeze 800 players into a 300 player deep desert? At launch or at peak periods, we could see hundreds in a queue for a single DD slot. Again, tying into the faction queues or just queues in general, this is a potential issue that we're going to come across. Another con is the lack of dev clarity on this matter up until this point. It has kind of been jumped on us, at least to my understanding. This is relatively very hot news off the press. But all those people worried about zergs, this does actually help prevent some of it. It will mean that combat and PvP could be more sparse and not as common. It's a big map. 300 players isn't a lot for such a huge map, but everyone will be drawn to the same points of interest, whether it's spice, schematics, control points. So ultimately, you will be coming across people if you're contending for these, which ultimately you will be. But you can see that they're trying to somewhat prioritize fairness and structure over the chaos of zergs. But I don't know. This is going to be very interesting to see how this develops. But let me know what you think about this. Hopefully it kind of makes sense. I hope I understood it all correctly. Let me know in the comments if I haven't. If you got anything out of this, consider liking, subscribing. It goes a real long way. Cheers.